Because, as we know, Catherine, simple calculator tells us that just tax hikes on the rich isn't even going to make a dent in the deficit, although largely we do that in some respects. What's your reaction?
Well, in New York City, we know how to count. And we understand from a pragmatic point of view, we need to raise revenues, we need to cut spending, and we need long-term reform and entitlements in our tax codes. We have to get all that done, but that is going to take a lot of pressure from the American public, because in Washington, they seem stalemated, no matter who's in charge.
There's only so many rich people, Catherine. Do you believe that we need to broaden the base, which might mean, and I can say it because I'm not running for office, that the middle class may have to pay more?
Well, I think broadening the base means we grow our economy, we create more jobs, we have more taxpayers, we have more business activity. We've got more than $1 trillion sitting on the sidelines, tied up in our American businesses that they're not putting to work because they can't figure out what's going to happen in Washington. We've lost faith that there's a solution to this problem. We have to bring this country together to get something done, and then we can all benefit. And I don't think that the middle class will suffer. I think the middle class is going to benefit from this. They're our most important asset, after all.
Absolutely. I mean, Doug, when you look at the letter, you know, you're obviously putting forward some recommendations, and those are largely based on some of the outlines from Simpson-Bowles. But at the end of the day, is pretty much anything on the table as far as you're concerned, that, you know, as far as business leaders in America are concerned, they'll consider anything to get some kind of deal done? Or are you very specific on what you want?
No, I think an open mind is required. You know, when it comes right down to it, though, the amount required, both in terms of broadening the base and increasing revenues and then recutting a deal on entitlements, is not that bad. It's not that painful. But you can actually bend the curve quite dramatically when you take those small incremental changes and put them over 10 or 15 or 20 years. I think we've been beat up with a lot of propaganda around how difficult these changes would be. They don't have to be that hard, because the long-term effect will be quite impactful.
Bingo, bingo, Douglas, because you know, if you watch Larry Night, that every 1% GDP growth over time will add about $3 trillion in a decade. Why aren't we talking more about growth?
Well, this initiative, this encouragement is really about deficit reduction. There's no question that if you reduce the deficit, you reduce the draw on the capital markets from the government, and that will end up providing excellent growth and jobs.
Catherine, as Douglas was saying, it's not rocket science. It shouldn't be rocket science, and yet we can't seem to get any kind of agreement. What do you think is the biggest hold-up? What do you think is the biggest sticking point, Catherine?
I think that this has been a problem that the American public hasn't fully digested, and we're going to try and launch a campaign across the country in the next few months that will mobilize that opinion, help people understand how the national debt affects every American, how it's holding back our economy. We're going to try and launch this campaign. We're going to try and engage the entire country, not leave this up to Washington to solve, because this is not a matter of politics. This is bringing our country together in our critical national interest.
Catherine, how are you going to do that, right? Because it hasn't been a problem. Our debt is still in demand, albeit largely from our own Federal Reserve. But to the average American, it hasn't played a role in their life. Right? And most people, if you ask them, will say, I'm dramatically overtaxed, even though federal income tax rates of the median income household have dropped in half in the last 30 years.
Well, people who are suffering today, and almost everybody has either a kid who's unemployed, somebody in their family who's unemployed or underemployed. The standard of living in this country has not gone up in the last 3 decades. It is time for us to come together as a country, forget our partisan differences, and figure out how we're going to deal with our long-term entitlement and spending problems and overall reform of our tax code. The business community is prepared to join with others across America, leaders in the states and the cities, in the organized labor, to push for serious conversation, dialogue across party lines, and reform.
Well, best of luck. Catherine, Douglas, thank you very much for joining us on Street Signs today.